does that sound? Does that make sense? All right. Well, very good. Well, a quick intro then. Barbara Morgan is an educator with us today and a retired NASA astronaut. She graduated with honors from Stanford, go Card, taught public school for 24 years in the Bay Area, at an Indian reservation in Montana, in McCall, Idaho, and in Ecuador. After working in the Teacher in Space program, she became NASA's first ever educator astronaut in 1998. She flew 5.3 million miles in space in 2007 on a 2-week mission to add new equipment to the International Space Station, which, by the way, I don't know if everyone got the email, is visible over Idaho Falls and eastern Idaho this week. And so we can send out another link if you haven't seen it yet, if you're interested in watching for the ISS. It'll tell you where to look and exactly when. And that's a fun little bonus. Thanks for that, Barbara. So anyhow, after retiring from NASA in 2008, Barbara has began providing vision and leadership to the state of Idaho, particularly in STEM education. She works with Boise State University as an emeritus faculty in residence there. And her many awards that she has amassed over her illustrious career include the Idaho Medal of Achievement, the state's highest civilian honor for service. And she now lives in Boise with her husband, Clay. And she is a good friend of my family, and I'm glad to finally be able to get her here. And so without further ado, we'll turn the time first to Barbara Morgan.
Well, hello, everybody, and or I should say greetings, Earthlings. And Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and thanks for the nice, kind introduction. I am thrilled and honored to be here with you all today. I love the Museum of Idaho. I got to work over there a few times over many, many years. It's been quite a few years since I've been there, but doing some work with some teachers and students. And I love what you have over there. And I wanted to especially thank all of you, the museum club members, for being so engaged and involved, and in particular for your support of the museum too, especially in these challenging times with COVID. We really depend on our supporters, so we appreciate that very much. So as Jeff mentioned, I had the pleasure of honor of helping construct the International Space Station. And Jeff, you thanked me for the station flying over Idaho Falls this week. So I had nothing to do with that. It's flying over on its own, that's its orbit. So just
let us know about it at least.
For sure. And it is really fun to watch the station. It is the biggest, brightest star in the night sky, and it's traveling at 17,500 miles per hour. And that's a very big number, and sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around big numbers. So I thought before we jump into some Q&A, and just like Jeff said, this is just a conversation. Let's call this a fireside chat, even though we don't have, at least I don't have a fire going in my fireplace right now, but we'll keep it very open-ended and very informal. That's my style, and knowing the Carr family, who are dear friends of ours, I'm pretty sure that's Jeff's style too. So 17,500 miles an hour. If you can think of some place about 5 miles away from the museum or from your home, can you take a moment to think about that? And maybe somebody can shout it out. Just come up with 2 locations that everybody would be familiar with that are about 5 miles away from each other.
I suppose that's probably about the city of Idaho Falls, west to east, end to end, more or less.
Okay, everybody got that? Thumbs up? Okay, strap into your car, and when I say go, you're gonna start at point A. Which side, Jeff? The west side?
Sure.
Okay, start on the west, travel east, kind of like the station does, right? Okay, when I say go, start driving towards the other edge of Idaho Falls on the east side, okay? Ready, set, go. Okay, I'm going to stop you about there. How far did you get?
You tell us.
Maybe out of the parking lot, I don't know. Okay, not very far. Okay, we're going to get into the International Space Station or the Space Shuttle and do the same exercise. Okay, when I say go, you'll start on the west edge of Idaho Falls. You're going to travel towards the east side of Idaho Falls. When I say stop, you will be there. Okay, ready? Go, stop. That's 17,500 miles an hour, or 5 miles per second. So for me, we go back and forth between Boise and McCall a lot. So that would be a 20-second ride from Boise to McCall. So that's how you're gonna, if you do have an opportunity to get out tonight or tomorrow night or the next night to watch International Space Station fly overhead, it's gonna be the biggest, brightest, fastest star screaming across the night sky for you. Okay, Jeff, should we start?
Sure. All right, let's go for it. So again, I'll start off with a couple of questions, but feel free jump in anytime. Okay, question number one, why should the government spend taxpayer dollars on space exploration?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked. And I'll start. And by the way, I tend to talk on and on, so if my answers are too long and too detailed, just tell me to shut up and we'll speed up. But our taxpayer dollars do pay for the space program, and that's why it is so important to me and my colleagues. We really, truly love sharing the experiences with everybody because we hope everybody will eventually get to do this themselves, right? But until that time, and although it is getting closer, until that time, the more we can share about the experiences, I think that helps all of us understand what this program is all about and why it is so important. So and we have lots of different reasons for it. For me in particular, being a teacher for so many years, space exploration is all about lifelong learning. And to me, we are learning so much about our home, and our home is no longer just Idaho Falls or Idaho or the United States or the North American continent or the North and South American continent or the planet. It goes well beyond that. We have very close neighbors. They're the other planets in our solar system. Then beyond that, we have very close neighbors, even though they seem at great distances, the next stars and then the next galaxies, et cetera, et cetera. It's all connected, and we are all connected. And there's so much for us to learn. And for me, especially as a former classroom teacher or a veteran classroom teacher for many, many years, that learning is never ending. And this stuff is really challenging to do. It's very, very difficult, but we put our minds together, we make it happen, and it sets up a great example for our kids to get inspired for lifelong learning themselves. So to me, that's my favorite reason for the internet, for space exploration. The other thing that I think is so important is it has brought us together in many, many ways. And tell you what, Jeff, rather than telling a story now, maybe we can come back to it so we can get to another question. But remind me to tell you about when I was working as Capcom in mission control on 9/11 and how that also changed my perspective of why space exploration and why our own country's involvement in it is so important. Okay.
That does sound interesting. All right, we'll make sure to get back to that. Good. Okay, so on the topic of space exploration, then, what's new? What's happening right now? I think sometimes we think of the Apollo program, right, or even Gemini and the things that have happened a long time ago, and we may not know what's going on right now. What's new?
Yeah, well, there's so much going on right now, and it's amazing how it changes and evolves over the years. But right now, as we are all talking right here, in 18 days, the Mars rover will be landing on Mars, and that's going to be super, super exciting. And I have a feeling some of you work at INL and are very familiar with the work that INL does that is critical for that mission. So another exploration mission on Mars, unhuman, but everything that we learn helps us to eventually be able to get people to Mars. And NASA's working really hard right now on the Artemis program, which will send our first female and male astronaut, not our first female, but not our first male astronaut, our first female astronaut to the moon, our first male another male astronaut's return to the moon. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my words. But the Artemis mission will learn how to really live for long duration on another celestial body, and get good at that, and then be able to go on to Mars, where we can do some great exploration there. One of the things that's going on now that I'm really excited about, it was a very sad day for all of us when NASA retired the space shuttle. We love the space shuttle. It's a truly remarkable space vehicle. But we needed to retire it to be able to have enough money to do things like go beyond low Earth orbit, go back to the moon and onto Mars. And there was a lot of doubt about this for a long time, but it's worked out really, really well. I love the public-private partnership that NASA has with the companies who are working on their own vehicles. And as you probably know, we've already launched our first commercial crew, so our first test crew, and then our first commercial crew to the International Space Station. And in fact, three of my colleagues are on board right now as part of the crew of 6 that are on board the International Space Station, but they got there through SpaceX Dragon commercial company. SpaceX also plans on sending its first commercial crew. It's not going to the International Space Station. It's going to orbit the Earth for several days sometime later this year, and that's going to be remarkable. So the first ever commercial orbital crew paying their way to have a space experience, and it's going to be phenomenal. And then later next year, SpaceX is working with a company called Axiom Space. In fact, a lot of these commercial companies just happen to have employees who work for years running NASA's program, so they pretty much know what they're doing. But they'll be sending, with one of my colleagues, Mike Lopez Alegria, a former NASA astronaut and space station commander, he'll be taking up 3 paying customers with him. He'll be the commander of that mission, so there'll be 3 tourists going on SpaceX Dragon to the International Space Station. And one of those folks is going to be Tom Cruise, and they're going to be doing a movie up there. So just a few of the many exciting things. Of course, NASA, the first A stands for aeronautics. They've got a lot of aeronautics research going on, and a lot of non-human missions as well. And there's too much for me to tell about. My answer would go on forever, but if you Google or if you just go to nasa.gov, you can learn so much in any area that you're interested in. I do want to add that I'm really excited right now with the Biden administration that NASA can now talk and focus more openly on climate science and on environmental science. And NASA, in fact, has just named, it's always had a chief scientist, but now it's got just named their key leader in environmental science. And so that's really gotten elevated. And especially when I tell you a couple stories later today, and we talk about this a little more, that is absolutely critical. So I'm really excited about that.
So we have one question from Ken and Colette. They wanted to know what you can share about NASA's trying to move to nuclear thermal propulsion, which has the possibility of cutting the time to travel to Mars down to 3 months rather than the current chemical propulsion taking 9 months.
Absolutely. And in fact, years and years ago, this was during Teacher in Space Days. So this was way back in 1986. I had an opportunity to spend some time at the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. And that's when I first learned about nuclear propulsion. And I'll never forget going into this, one of the laboratories, and there were three gentlemen in there working on nuclear propulsion. And they were very close to retirement age. I would say they were probably 64, 68, somewhere in there. They were like kids in a candy shop. They were so, so excited. And again, this was back in 1986, but they were so excited about the nuclear propulsion that they were working on, that and eventually to get us to Mars and beyond. And they would never live long enough to see that day when that actually happened, right? And then of course we have all the great work going on with nuclear propulsion and the batteries at INL. And yes, they work really well. The batteries have been on other rovers on Mars, and we've got this one coming up. And I do think there's a very good chance, that eventually we'll get there where we will be using that instead of chemical propulsion. Another rocket too that's being, a rocket engine that's being designed by one of my colleagues, Franklin Chang Diaz, through his Ad Astra lab. Franklin is working on an ion engine that, similar to nuclear propulsion, where you start out slow at first, but you gain speed over time, and it definitely shortens the length of these missions. And then the other thing that's really good about it is you don't have to worry about like on Franklin's engine, there's no metal engine bell. That's all done through magnetism, through magnetics. So you don't have to worry about heat melting bells and things like that. So there's just so much fascinating science behind all of this. And thank goodness for our really smart scientists and engineers who are working on this stuff. And eventually we will. Just like now we can actually send tourists into space, right? Or we will soon. And I think hopefully it won't be too long before we're actually able to shorten these missions to Mars, which is critical to go from a very long trip that ultimately would end up being about 3 years to 3 months. 3 months one way anyway.
That's a big difference, that's for sure. So I saw that Kelly had her hand raised at one point. Kelly, did you have a question? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself. We still have you there? Okay. Well, we'll come back to you then if you don't have it yet, or maybe we've covered it. We do have one other question in the chat. And you sort of touched on this a little bit, talking about SpaceX, but how do you feel in general about the privatization of space travel?
I think that's a great question. I think it's a great idea. And that's been fascinating to watch. As human beings, sometimes it's hard for us to accept change, even though change is inevitable. And to me, it was really interesting. We were all really sad when the space shuttle was retired, but there were so many doubters about private industry. How can SpaceX do this stuff? Yeah, they'll be able to go suborbital, but how are they ever going to be able to go orbital? It's much more complicated than ever. And then you've got SpaceX coming along, who not only knows how to go orbital, but actually reusable in a much safer way than the space shuttle ever was. And we have to open things up. The government can't. First of all, we don't have enough tax dollars to pay for it, right? And these things need to be opened up so that the program is everybody's and everybody has the opportunities. And it's working out really, really well with these public-private partnerships. And eventually, I think we'll end up having some that are not public-private partnerships, that are just private companies taking over. And if you think about it, it's a natural progression. We think about early airplanes, starting with the Wright brothers experimentation, and then the airplanes were used by government basically, and then to now where you and I can easily, maybe not right now during the pandemic, but before and after, easily hop on a plane and go wherever we'd like to. And that's by private companies.
Very good. All right, a couple more questions have just come in the chat now from Marianne. They're very different, so we'll ask them one at a time. So the first one is, what was the emotional experience of going into space and returning? And did that have an effect on your concept of the world?
That is a great question, and that'll help bring it back to one of the stories that I wanted to tell. But first of all, you've worked really, really hard for many, many years, and and then as a crew, you've worked together with your crewmates and with your mission control team for a full year. When you strap into the space shuttle to launch on launch day, you are really tired. And in fact, we have to be alert, of course, and we have to be paying attention to all the last minute things that are going on with our launch control team and then transferring over to mission control. We have to do some comm checks or communication checks, so we have to be awake for that. So I can tell you, as for launch, I was on the mid deck with Aldrew and Dave Williams, and we were kind of jabbing each other with our elbows to make sure that we were awake, because we were so tired we were so tired from everything, and then you're on your back for about 2 hours, so it's really easy to kind of take a snooze. So we had to keep jabbing each other with our elbows to keep ourselves awake. Then when you launch into space, so it is amazing. You are accelerate as your space shuttle clears the launch tower, which is not very high up. You're already going 100 miles an hour, and you keep accelerating, accelerating, and accelerating until you hit 17,500 miles an hour. And you guys now have a feel for how fast that is, right? So, and all of that happens, that acceleration to 17,500 miles an hour happens within 8.5 minutes. So it is a real fast ride. We don't exceed 3 Gs, or 3 times Earth's gravity, because if we did, the wings would fall off the space shuttle. So as we're going through the thickest part of the atmosphere, it's called max Q, or maximum dynamic pressure, we actually throttle the engines back to about 67% so that we don't over G the space shuttle. And then once we get through that thickest part of the atmosphere, that's when we throttle back up to about 106% on those engines. So you are really taken off. And I mentioned the 3 Gs. So I had been told ahead of time it's going to feel like a 2-ton gorilla jumping up and down on your chest. I didn't really feel that. I just felt this. I felt this enormous push on my back. It didn't hurt or anything, but just this strongest push ever, like the hand of God pushing you into space, and you really know you're going somewhere. You're kind of plastered there. It's very hard to lift your legs and your arms. And I know I had a huge smile on my face. We all did. We were all hooping and hollering, and that smile was just plastered there. A lot of that was because I was extremely happy, and the rest of that was because of the G forces that plastered that smile there. So it's quite a ride, and I didn't know what I would think. I knew that I would be very alert and would be paying attention to everything that I'd been trained to pay attention to and what we needed to follow and do. I didn't even think ahead of time what would I be thinking, other than here's what we need to be doing, and keep working on what you need to be doing. Well, I was so surprised that I remember what popped into my head was, wow, we're on our way. We're really on our way. And in 3 days, we're going to be at the International Space Station. I was so excited about that. 3 days we'll be at the International Space Station. So that was my feeling all the way up. We call it uphill. Returning was a different story. So returning, I was on the flight deck for the return, helping the pilot, our commander and pilot, with the reentry and the landing. So that was a lot of fun. Also, really busy time. And we had we floated a pen in front of us, and I had some camera equipment I had to work with to help with the pilot's heads-up display, along with all the books that I had. My job was to be ready if we had any kind of emergency, to be ready to go into our reference data to figure out, okay, we just lost a computer, so if we lose this or this or this or this on these other systems, here's what we have to be ready to take care of. So that was all part of my job. And then reconfiguring the cables and so that we could go from this little handheld camera that we had to transfer to the heads up display when we got closer to the landing. So it was quite busy. But Rick Mastracchio, who was sitting next to me, we floated a little pen in front of us so we could watch when we started coming into gravity. Well, that pen slowly kind of came down, and then all of a sudden just hit the floor. And at that point, we really felt heavy. I mean, my rear end has never felt so heavy in a seat. And I thought for sure we were at 2 or 3 Gs, and we looked at the G meter, and we never exceeded Earth's gravity. We never exceeded 1 G, but after being weightless for 2 weeks, you just feel really heavy coming home. That heaviness, we'd been warned was going to last several days. It did not for me, although it's really easy to get dizzy, and I had quite a dizzy experience after we landed, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But where I had a heavy feeling when we landed, and I've told very few people this, but when we landed, that whole mission, I had my friends from 51L from the Challenger crew, on my shoulder with me the whole time. We also had our 7 friends from Columbia on our shoulders with us the whole time. And when we landed, I had a really heavy feeling in my heart. And I thought, wow, we lost our Challenger friends, we lost our Columbia friends, and we just landed. And it was a really sad feeling, like, why were we so lucky kind of feeling. So that was pretty emotional. Okay, back to what was that second part of that question, Jeff? Because I do want to tell that story.
Yeah, so the second part of the question that we already asked was, did that change your concept of the world?
Great, yeah. So I can tell you that my concept of the world didn't really change, but there were a couple things that definitely strengthened, that I got a very new perspective on. And one of those, so let me start with the one that I think is the most important. But I picked this picture behind me. This was after we had undocked from the International Space Station, which is over here before we came home. And I put this picture up as a background, especially because I wanted to share this story with you. As you're going 17,500 miles an hour around the planet, up about 250 miles above the surface of the Earth, you are orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes. So you get 45 minutes a day, 45 minutes a night, 45 minutes a day, 45 minutes a night. It's amazing because you get 16 gorgeous sunrises and sunsets every day. And our pictures, our cameras don't do justice to what those actually look like. You can see pictures online of sunrises and sunsets that astronauts have taken, but they just don't do it justice. There's so many colors in those, and so many layers in those sunrises and sunsets. But this particular picture, and my whole crewmate, all of my crewmates and I, we never really were able to get our heads wrapped around this. Every time we looked out the window, we thought about this. But when you look at this picture of Earth, can you tell whether you're on the daytime or nighttime side? Should we take a vote just for fun?
Sure, yeah. Anyone? I guess I can't, since you asked. Yeah.
Okay. Daytime? Got a couple. Nighttime? Got a few. Okay. And for most people, we can't tell because we don't get to see their wonderful faces, but or hands. So you're actually on the daytime side here. Okay, the planet's shiny, it's bright, you can see the planet. But so right now, if you were to go outside, like I can look out the window here and I'm looking up, and when I'm here in Boise, it's kind of a cloudy day, semi-cloudy day. So when I'm looking up, I see lots of white, lots of blue, and lots of gray, right? And when you go outside or look out your window, you're going to see something similar. And doesn't it seem like it just goes on forever from our perspective here on Earth? When you are on the daytime side of the planet in space, it is absolutely pitch black. And it's a black that I've never seen anywhere on Earth, but it is absolutely pitch black all the way down to the edge of the planet. And I don't know if you can see in this picture behind me, but that really thin blue line, and I like to hold up my fingers, it's about an eighth of an inch. It's like the skin on an apple. That is all of our atmosphere that from our perspective here on Earth looks like it goes on forever, right, for miles. When you're in space looking at it, it's pitch black, absolutely pitch black down to the edge of the Earth. And so you're looking at that and thinking, wow, all of the plants, all of the animals, all around this planet, all the other human beings, all around this planet, we're all sharing that teeny, teeny, tiny, thin blue line of atmosphere. And then you think about all the other resources and everything too. And you realize this whole planet is hurtling through space. It's traveling faster than 17,500 miles an hour through space. And we are all on it. This planet is a spaceship and we are all on it together. We all share it together. So that really strengthens or reinforces any kind of environmental leanings you had before you flew, if you know what I mean.
Gosh, that's incredible just to see that, to think of that proportion. I mean, that's the mind-boggling part about all of this, right? The numbers are just so hard to comprehend, but seeing that thin blue line there does put it in perspective.
And knowing that we're all in it together, and you've probably read about like the Apollo astronauts saying how you can tell it's one Earth. You don't see the lines that you see on the maps between different countries. You can see a couple. It's not really a line, but for example, in the Middle East, where Israel irrigates and where some of its neighboring countries don't irrigate, you can definitely see that demarcation. But that's about all. Everything else, it's just one planet that we're all living on and sharing together. And we are very, very committed to coming back and trying to do everything we can to try to help take care of it.
That's wonderful. Some more good questions have come in the chat right now. So the second question from Marianne then, and I think this can tie into talking about the environmental mission potentially, but I guess I don't want to, you can take this in any direction you like. What are some of the things learned in space that you think are most useful in our day-to-day lives?
Great question. And I would say number one is that perspective. We don't always think about taking care of our planet as part of our day-to-day lives, but especially in this pandemic now, I think we really do. I think people are paying more attention to just natural phenomena around them and how it affects us and how things that we do affect it, right? And I think the pandemic is a great example of that, on how we can affect the trajectory of this pandemic. There are lots of science experiments going on. On our mission, we were a construction mission. We did a little bit of science, but our job, and it took quite a few years, over many years, to build the International Space Station. But we were a construction crew, so we did very, very few experiments. Our job was to get this beautiful International Space Station conducted. But a lot of the research on board directly, and this has been going on since the beginning of NASA, not just during shuttle and International Space Station days, but all of the science that's going on board definitely has applications for right back here on Earth that affect our daily lives. And hopefully the answers that we'll learn from these experiments, from pure science experiments, will be able to be translated into great engineering projects, great medical, great pharmaceuticals and things like that. Development. So an example of that is in space, your bones lose calcium, and so a lot of research is some of the research is specifically dedicated to calcium loss in the bones, to bone restructuring issues, and to muscle mass issues. And those obviously have direct implications, especially for us older folks, in terms of osteoporosis and inactivity and things like that. That's just one of many examples. There's a lot of material science going on, a lot of crystal growth going on. And that's, to me, I really love those experiments. I just was reading about one last night, and I'm already forgetting today. Sorry about that. Which crystal it is that they're growing. I apologize, but if you can understand that this is protein crystal growth, and if you can grow these protein crystals in space without having gravity pulling at them, they're going to be more pure shape. You know, as these proteins grow on Earth, whether it's in your body or elsewhere, gravity is always playing with them, so they're not as pure a crystal. So if we can develop these pure crystals with their shape on orbit, take a coronavirus, for example, then you can really understand its structure. And then when you're targeting, when you're developing a medication that would target that particular structure of, let's get rid of coronavirus, but let's say any protein, then you can be more effective. That pharmaceutical that you develop, that medication, can be more effective. So those are just a couple of many examples. We also have experiments that are looking beyond, so looking out into the universe so that we can learn more about our universe, about the physics behind everything and how this all works, and our place in this universe. So there's an alpha magnetic spectrometer on board the International Space Station that is looking at dark matter, and it's over the years is going to give us a lot more information that will help us understand the universe and the beginnings and how this, why we're here and how this all happened.
Gosh, nothing small about those questions, huh?
Great questions.
Yeah. So here's another one that's come in on the chat, and I'm glad this person asked about this because I wanted to get into this also. So folks who perhaps watched the recent Challenger documentary on Netflix may know something about this or have seen something about this, which you participated in, of course. But the question is about your opportunity. How did it come to you to participate in the space program at all? I've heard the application for the Teacher in Space program described as Willy Wonka-esque sort of a contest, and not the case. Ah, darn.
Yeah.
That sounded more fun. So how did you do it? How do you go from being a teacher to deciding, yes, this is a step that I want to take?
So yeah, thanks for asking that. So as teachers, we are always looking at how we can further our own knowledge and experiences, right? Teachers, I know people think, oh, teachers have summers off. Well, they usually don't, because they're usually taking a whole bunch of classes or going on some kind of learning, experiential learning or expedition or whatever, to help them be able to be better classroom teachers. Because what we want to do is knock down those four walls, bring the world to our classrooms, and bring our students out to the world. and make learning really exciting and interesting for our students. So when the Teacher in Space program was announced, it was, many years ago, President Reagan announced on national TV, we were watching the evening news, that he wanted to send a teacher into space. And that's how that got announced. The application for it, so this is why it wasn't Willy Wonka. It was, let me just go back and say, so teachers, it was a natural thing for thousands and thousands of teachers to apply to this. And some of us just got lucky. That's the way I look at it, because these teachers were very, very qualified and wonderful, wonderful human beings and wonderful, wonderful teachers. So we had a big, long, fancy application that had to be filled out. We had several essay questions to write and think about. And those were terrific because he actually got you to reflect on your own classroom teaching, your school's learning environment, and all of that stuff. And then how you would tie space exploration into it. There were 3 goals for the Teacher in Space program. And the very first goal was to raise the prestige of the teaching profession. And this is why it was not a Willy Wonka, even though I love Willy Wonka. So, but this is why this was not a Willy Wonka contest. A year or 2 before Teacher in Space program was started, there was a national report that came out from the National Academies called A Nation at Risk. And it really lambasted our education system, our public education system. And it painted the entire country and all the teachers and all the administrators with this really broad paintbrush of how bad we all were and how we're all failing. Schools are failing, students are failing, teachers are failing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And and it was a really, really tough time to be a teacher. And I remember there was also a saying that we would hear. It was very loud and very clear, and some of you may remember it, but a saying that you heard all the time, so really in our face, was those that can do, those that can't teach. So that was the environment at the time. And I am forever grateful to NASA for turning that negativity around, to NASA and our dear first and always first Teacher in Space, Krista McAuliffe, for turning that around, because it caused people to pay attention. Krista was such a wonderful representative of the teaching profession, and it caused people to pay attention to all this negativity and to see what was going on in their own schools, in their own classrooms, in their own communities. And it really, really turned things around. Unfortunately, that negativity is always lurking in the background. And even to this day, we still have all kinds of efforts to try to undermine public education. And I'll just tell you, my strong belief is that public education is the foundation of our democracy. Without public education, it's really tough for us to have a democracy. And when we see what's been going on around, in Washington, D.C. and around the country this past couple years, I think it really brings it to light.
So a couple of follow-on questions to that that also come from the chat. Just good timing.
And also, unless it's faster to do it this way, if people want it on mic and ask questions, I know Jeff and I are fine with that. We'd love to hear your voices too. Otherwise, we just hear ourselves talk.
Absolutely. Yes, please do. So first with these two, is there a current pathway for teachers now into NASA programs? And the second point of that is, are there other non-military professionals who train to be astronauts now?
Yeah, those are great questions. So very early on, by early on, I mean during the Apollo program, not during the space shuttle program. So early on in NASA's history of human spaceflight. So NASA started out with military astronauts and you had to be test pilots, right? And then during the Apollo program, they opened it up to scientists and engineers. So folks like Harrison Schmitt, Jack Schmitt, who did geology on the moon, was not a military person. So it's not been totally military for many years, the astronaut corps. When for the 10 years that I was in the astronaut corps from 1998 to 2008, I would say it was about 50-50. So 50 military, 50 non-military. My class itself, we come in as a class. We were the Penguin class, or Group 17. And about half of us were military and half of us were civilian. So that's been like that for years and years and years. Is there a path for teachers? Yes. So in 2000, just trying to think when this would have been, 2000, I want to say right around the time of 9/11, NASA had opened up its requirements for being an astronaut one more time. And so that was, you need to have a degree, a science or a math or an engineering degree. You need to have experience and advanced degrees and advanced degrees and or experience, years of experience. So for example, the average age of the beginning astronaut is about 35 years old. That's how much experience you really need to have. But they also open it up to not just people with degrees in science, engineering, and mathematics, but in addition to being scientists or engineers or medical doctors and bringing that kind of experience in, they also open it up to people with teaching experience and expertise. So and that's when they I was kind of a guinea pig, actually. So when I joined the class of 1998, and that all worked out well. And so then NASA hired 3 more teachers a few years later. 2 of them are still there, but that's Dottie Metcalf-Lindenberger, who's since left NASA, and she's a geoscientist now who also does lots of education outreach. But Joe Acaba and Ricky Arnold are still with the program. And in fact, Joe was just named as one of the Artemis astronauts. So he's been considered for one of those slots for a moon mission. So how can teachers get involved? They can still, if they want to be astronauts, make sure they have got the right degrees, and they definitely have the right experience, because if you're a classroom teacher, you have all the right stuff to be able to be a good astronaut, right? But you also have to have those degrees, and yeah. I hope that makes sense. But there are many, many ways to get involved in the program. And so for all of you, if any of you have are teachers or have family members who are teachers, or dear friends who are teachers, to me, the fastest way to do it, or the easiest way, because NASA has so much stuff and it's impossible to find. But if you go to the NASA website and in the search box, just put in NASA Express, or just Google NASA Express, it will get you there. And every week or so, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month, NASA Office of STEM Engagement, which is their education office, sends out a wonderful email just filled with lots of opportunities for students and teachers, kindergarten through university. And there are so many ways to get engaged. It's great. Then I do want to put in a plug for our Idaho students, in particular, if you know anyone who this fall will be a junior in high school. But also, if you don't know anyone who's going to be a junior this fall, but you know that they're coming up, maybe they're in elementary school now, but look into this program, because it's absolutely fabulous. Our State Department of Education runs one of our NASA partner programs. Right now, we may change the name because unfortunately the acronym is unfortunate, but right now it's called the Idaho Science and Aerospace Scholars Program, or ISAS, ISAS. So we've decided we probably need to change the ISIS. So it might end up being called the Science and Aerospace Scholars of Idaho. So it'll be SASSY instead. We're not sure where that's going, but it is for high school juniors. There are many, many partners in this program. It is for any entering high school junior all across the state of Idaho. And it is free. It doesn't cost anything to the students. Let me just tell you quickly about some of the partners. Boise State University started it with, but our other partners are University of Idaho, Idaho State University, and then the local, it's some of our other colleges and community colleges. Hewlett Packard, INL is a big partner in this. Micron and NOAA. NASA, of course, is a big partner, the FAA, the Air National Guard, et cetera. So it's brought in a whole bunch of partners and teams from in business and industry in STEM fields from around the state. So the students apply, they get accepted, and in the spring semester, they do an online course with Idaho Digital, IDL. I used to call it IDLA. I can't remember the exact acronym now, but it's Idaho Digital Learning. And they take a semester-long course that is NASA-based curriculum with a lot of Idaho STEM infused into it. So, for example, they have webinars with both live webinars with both NASA employees, scientists, and engineers, but also with Idaho. For example, an INL scientist or engineer might give one of the webinars, folks like that. They can get science credit for this class, and they can also get dual credit from Boise State Universities for college credit. Then at the end of that spring course, where they've learned all about they've done some math and some science, and they've also learned about both history and current and future space exploration missions. Then we have 3 capstone celebrations, one in Eastern Idaho, and that's run through the Center of Advanced Energy Studies and INL and ISU. And the kids will go, and their families, so they're not their families, but the kids and the students and their parents get to go to a full day of exploration, and the students get to then meet people in person, meet the students that they've been working with on their teams, and also meet their teachers and meet the real people for real in person. Then another academy, and the kids can choose, they can go to all 3 academies if they want to, but it's a day at the University of Idaho, and where they're again engaging in wonderful hands-on activities and taking tours of the campus and learning from scientists and engineers. And then in Southern Idaho, we don't do it at Boise State. We do it because, and I'll tell you why in a moment, but we do that at the Air National Guard out at Gowan Field. And also they do things like work with NOAA and launch a weather balloon. They also learn more about the FAA, and they climb to the top of that big new tower, the FAA tower, and they go behind the scenes and see the radar and learn about TRACON and things like that. So that's a one-day experience for them, and they get honored for completing that spring course. So again, that's free. And then the top performing students, there's slots for some 88, sometimes 100. We're able to take a few more now because we've had to go virtual this past year and probably will this summer. But they do a week-long summer academy, all expenses paid. And like I said, we did it virtual this year, but in the past and in the future, we'll go back to in-person, where they spend a week at Boise State University on campus, so they get a college experience, and with lots and lots of hands-on STEM activities. They design a human mission to Mars, so they divide up into teams, and they learn problem solving, critical thinking, teamwork, communication, so very important life skills. And then as part of that experience too, they get in an airplane, many of them for the first time in their lives as high school, kids who will be entering high school seniors by this time. And they go to NASA Ames Research Center and get 2 days of tours and speaking with in person with scientists and engineers and managers and everyone else at the NASA Ames Research Center. And for the Academy students, they can also get, again, paid for another credits for dual, dual credits for college. So it gets them a little bit ahead, chipping away at some of those college credits too. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. So to learn more about that program, and maybe Jeff, I'll give you a link and we can send that out afterwards, but you can go to the Idaho State Department of Education, and for now, just type in Idaho Science and Aerospace Scholars. So fabulous program.
Sounds great. Cool.
Sorry, that was too detailed, but you can tell I love the program.
No, it's fun. It's fun to see that passion come through, and it's fun to be able to do something with space specifically for Idaho students too, right? It's wonderful that you're able to do that.
And along with that too, it attracts, kids love space, so that's kind of the hook is to get them in, but it exposes them to all kinds of STEM, and we're especially keen on exposing them to Idaho STEM opportunities so that they know, and that's part of the reason why it's ISU and U of I and Boise State, so that they know they're a great, they can get a relatively inexpensive education right here if they want to stay in state, especially for undergraduate, but hopefully we want them all to come back no matter where they are and eventually help contribute to the wonderful STEM work that's going on. I might add too that not all the students are necessarily interested or are thinking about a STEM career, and that's fine too. They might want to be history majors or business majors or literature majors or writers or musicians or artists. It doesn't matter. This is for all students. They just need to at least have a little bit of interest in STEM to want to get started in it. And there's a lot of career exploration in this program. And we've had students say, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but after this, I really don't want to, but I'm really interested in being a bat scientist, or I'm really interested in law and how, international law and how these things are all put together. So it helps them, besides getting great experiences that will help them academically, it also helps them career-wise as well.
Sure it does. Very cool. All right, I'm going to shift gears on you real quick. You used the phrase a few moments ago, the right stuff, and I have to ask, which Hollywood space movie does the best job at encapsulating some portion of the experience that maybe the rest of us will never understand?
Great question. And first of all, never say never, right? Because I flew when I was pretty old, right? So never say never.
Fair enough.
You never know. And the way things are going now, especially with our public-private partnerships and our private companies, in fact, right now, that first SpaceX totally commercial mission that is going, that is not going to the International Space Station, but there's a seat now this should be a Willy Wonka contest, but the rich guy, I can't remember his name, who bought the entire flight. He is doing it to help with the St. Jude's Foundation for cancer, and he is going to pick someone who works with St. Jude's. He's going to pick another philanthropist, and I can't remember exactly what organization that's for, but the third seat is basically going to I think it's going to be kind of a wide open contest. So that just came out like yesterday or the day before in the news. So put your application in for that one. But okay, I talked so long. Sorry about that. I've kind of forgotten the question. It was about the right stuff.
The movie. What's the
which movie? Yeah.
movie? Yeah.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I'd have to say The Right Stuff did a really was one of the all-time best and did a great job. There are so many scenes in there of what the atmosphere is really like, or was back during the Apollo days. Maybe I'll touch on a few others. I thought the movie and Apollo 11 was also really, really well done. Now the Apollo 11 um, uh, the Apollo 11 weightless environment stuff looked really real. Like those actors who were being the astronauts really looked like they were floating, and that is because they actually were. So that was filmed inside. Those floating scenes were filmed inside KC-135 or a DC-3, but I think in those days it was the KC-135. It's an aircraft that NASA has that flies a series of parabolas. And over the top of the parabola, you get about 30 seconds of weightlessness. And it's used for all kinds of things. It's used for training astronauts to give them experience in being weightless before they're going to fly into space. All kinds of science experiments are flown on those planes, and they're fascinating experiments. Also, anything that we're going to take into space with us. Maybe, for example, I flew on that plane several times to help with some new space suits that we were designing, and we wanted to see, we wanted to test them out, test out different functions or different component parts, and to make sure that these things were going to work and that astronauts would be able to easily, hate this word, but interface with them. It's a quick word, all right. So, the film crew for Apollo 11 with Tom Hanks and all those guys, they actually had their film cameras and everything inside that KC-135. So they were filming those scenes as the astronauts were floating. Another movie that I thought, a space movie that I thought did a great job making things look real, and I hope I get the name of the movie right. It was a kids movie called Ender's Game. Does that sound familiar to you all? Okay, so that was filmed right on Earth, but the simulated microgravity or lack of gravity looked so real. Well, two MIT graduates, they were either master's or PhD graduates, I don't remember, but they were on the special effects team for that movie, and they really understood the physics of weightlessness. And so they were able to help the film crew. They designed all these contraptions and everything, and they were able to help the film crew and the actors act out in a way that the physics were really going to work, even though they were right here on Earth. So I thought that was really well done. One fun movie that got a lot wrong, but it was just fun, was Gravity, right? And there were so many things wrong with that. For example, remember when, what's the name of the famous actress that acted that?
Sandra Bullock.
Yes, Sandra Bullock. So remember when her commander, and I can't remember who that actor was either, but they're just about ready to launch, and he starts asking her about her, or they're out in space, and he asks about her family. Oh, do you have any kids or whatever?
George Clooney.
George Clooney, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. So that never would have happened. Your crew mates really, really well before, long before you ever launch into space with them. And then to remember when she starts crying and a tear rolls down her face while she's in space. That would never happen. There's no gravity to pull that tear down. Oh, what did they do? They had it roll down her face and then it flicked off. And that would never happen either, because in a microgravity environment, adhesion and cohesion of water molecules, the adhesion and cohesion take over everything. It is amazing. Water, that water just sticks together, and it sticks to everything. And I don't, we don't know why when you remove the gravity part that adhesion and cohesion are so strong, but they are. So what would have actually happened if she started crying is that tear would have just stuck to her eye and kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So she just had this, she would have been blind. She just had this big blob of water, that eventually would have covered her whole face. So yeah, that was totally wrong. And then the other thing about the movie that I thought was pretty funny was after everything that happened to her, and then she ends up, remember when they splashed down? I don't understand why when she splashed down, she was then able to end up on the island or wherever she was without having first had a huge shark or moray eel attacks while she was under the water. So also really loved, really loved The Martian. I thought that was very, very well done. And there were a few things wrong with that too, including gravity issues, but also being able to jetpack your way back up to join up with the crew, the rescue crew. But again, there's a lot in the Martian book that is really, really right. So.
Read that. Well,
And I think people are allowed to have artistic license, right?
absolutely. Well, they help get us interested in space, right?
Yeah. And they're fun. They're fun to watch.
Absolutely.
One
All
of
right.
my colleagues, Jeff, maybe you can have him come, maybe he'd be willing to help out sometime, but the new distinguished educator in residence at Boise State University is my classmate and colleague. Um, oh my gosh, I'm just having a senior moment, sorry. He's a really good friend. This is terrible. Steve Swanson, Swanee I call him. That's why I was having trouble coming up with his name. But Steve Swanson is at Boise State University. And Steve is a PhD computer scientist, a real sharp guy, great guy, very, very down to earth and a lot of fun. And in fact, for our Idaho Science and Aerospace Scholars Program, one of the wonderful sessions the kids had was with Steve, and they watched The Martian together, and then they had a big conversation afterwards with Steve about what was real and what wasn't. So I would highly recommend that for the museum.
Yeah, that sounds fun. That's a great idea. Good. So there are a couple more, and I realize we're going long on time, but I think we could talk forever. There are a couple more questions in the chat, and I do want to get to one or two, but I also do want to leave room if there is anyone. Let's leave an awkward pause right now and see if anyone fills it.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to fill it because I want to know one of the questions and I want to make sure we get to this. Can you talk about your 9/11 experience that you had mentioned earlier?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And along with that, back to that question about kind of change of your perspective or change in your life or whatever. There's one other story I want to tell about that. Yeah, so 9/11, I was Capcomming. We had a crew on orbit. That crew on orbit was our very first space. No, it was not. It was our third, space station mission, space station crew. And by the way, I don't know if you folks know this, but the International Space Station has been permanently habitated now for 20 years. It has always had human beings on it now for 20 years. So, but this was early. This was expedition number 3 that had 2 Russians and 1 American. All 3 were former military. The American was Frank Culbertson, and Misha I'll butcher their last names, so I won't go into the Russian names. But earlier in their careers, they had been pointing, their military aircraft and ammo and everything at each other, right? And here they were on International Space Station together, and doing really, really well. So I don't know if you know, but Russia is a major partner in the International Space Station. International Space Station is US, Russia, Canada, Japan, and the European Space Agency. So 16 nations work together to build it over many, many, many years. So from basically 1990, the actual construction part, the designing went on long before this, but the construction from 1998 up until 2000 and I believe. So, or 2000, yeah, I think 2009, we completed construction, even though we're still doing, we're still taking new equipment up all the time. So they're on orbit. I was Capcom. I was on an overnight, so I was on the overnight shift. Capcom is the position, it's the generally astronaut position in mission control, who relays all the mission control messages up to the crew. Okay, so if it's a electrical system problem or not problem, or environmental, or stowage and logistics, you name it, whatever it is, the the person in mission control who's responsible for that system lets the flight director know, and we're all listening in, of course. Here's an issue. They talk it back and forth. They talk about it with the rest of the team. Does anybody have anything that they need to add or not, or whatever? And then once it's decided what information needs to go up to the crew, it's the Capcom position that actually speaks that information to the crew. And the reason for that is because of our experience as crew members and knowing the people so well, that we're able to translate things to the crew, maybe in a different way than the engineer who's responsible for the environmental system may send it up. Okay, or we may say, yeah, if it's not critical, we're pretty sure that this is what they're doing right now. Can we give them a few minutes to get that taken care of, and then we'll call it up. Okay, so that's what's going on, and we had put the crew, I'm trying to think, overnight shift. No, the crew was awake. The crew was awake, I believe. I really don't remember. They're on a different time frame than us because we try to go during daylight hours. We try to have the crew awake while Russia is awake. All right. Anyway, the flight director sits right next to the Capcom, and I've got a TV monitor. We've got computer monitors that are watching. We do have a TV monitor that we can turn on if we need to. The flight director has 2 TV monitors, and typically the flight director will keep those monitors on CNN or anything where it's kind of round the clock news, right? I don't think we even have that anymore, but just round the clock news. And we were just wrapping up our last talk with the crew. We were getting ready for handoff. So our shift was going to end, and the new mission control shift was coming in, and we were going to do our handover to them. And so it was just before that time. So it was earlier in the morning, and the flight director says, "Oh." And I turned to look at him, and just beyond him on the screen, the first plane was flying into the Twin Towers. Okay, so we were watching that unfold as right in front of our eyes, and then we watched the second one, and etc. So you kind of have to remember we're in a government facility. I'm sure INL probably did the same, went into some kind of immediate lockdown of sorts, and that's what happened at mission control. So we went into lockdown because there was fear. By then they knew about the Pentagon, and they knew about the plane that those brave people had caused to crash, so it didn't hit the White House. So all of this stuff is going on, and we're waiting also to hear word from our higher ups outside of mission control on kind of some instructions on what we ought to be looking for and what we ought to be doing. Meanwhile, we need to make sure that the crew is safe. They're out taking photographs as they're going around, every 90 minutes, taking photographs because they happen to be flying over New York at the time. And at the same time, my phone rang and the flight director's phone rang just about the same time. And the flight director's call came from Russia, from SRP. SRP is the Russian equivalent in SOUP, which is Russian Moscow Control. It's the flight director equivalent. And my phone rang, and it was a phone call from the Glavny, and the Glavny is the Russian Capcom. Okay. And basically at the same time that they were talking to each of us. And here's what the Glavny said to me. First of all, he said, I am so sorry. We are so sorry. This is horrible. And first and foremost, we want you to know that how bad we feel about this. And second, we want to know from you, what do you need from us? What would you like us to do, you know, with station and with our crew up there, to make sure that nothing, you know, that everything's going to continue on safely with the crew. And, you know, so we again took that information and went right to work doing whatever it was we needed to do. But later on, after I went home later on that afternoon, we stayed through the shift to help the next shift, and then went home. And it's probably about 4 or 5 in the evening. I sat down, and that's when I started really thinking about all of it. And it really hit me that thank goodness for the International Space Station, because I felt like if we didn't have something that we had been working jointly together on, a grand mission, something really challenging and fun, and you know, that affects and is part of all of humanity. I had the feeling that the Russian response to 9/11 would have been very different than what we experienced at NASA. So that's when it really hit me too, that why is space exploration so important, and what is most important about the International Space Station? It's an amazing engineering design feat. It's an amazing scientific orbiting laboratory. But to me, what's most important about it is that it is international, and it's forcing us in a really pleasant way to learn to work with each other. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, that was wonderful. I think a number of us were waiting for that story and that experience, and that's really special that you were able to be a part of that firsthand. So thank you for that perspective too.
That other perspective, and I'll try to keep this story shorter, but in addition to the whole environmental and the international, this is something that I did not expect. But so when you're on these missions, there's so much to do. You have very little time to look out the window. Thank goodness now our International Space Station crews who are up there for 6 months up to a year, 3 months, 6 months a year, it's more of a marathon rather than a sprint, and so the pace is a little slower. Their days are still really busy, but they do get a day and a half off. So Saturday's a half day of cleaning, and then a half day off, and Sunday's off for them, and they can do whatever they want. So they do have a lot more time to, at least during those days, to go over and look out the window, which is the best thing you can do when you're in space, to get that perspective from outside of our Earth's atmosphere. So for us on these shuttle missions, it was so busy, we had to sneak views out the window. And so one of the things I did was always volunteered to put the shades on the windows. As you're going around the Earth that fast, right, you're going to hit, like I said, 45 minutes day, 45 minutes night, 45 minutes day, 45 minutes night. Well, we don't sleep for 45 minutes and then wake up and do all our daytime activities in 45 minutes. We sleep a regular 7 hour night time. So we put shades on the windows so we don't get blasted awake, every time we hit the daytime side of the Earth. So I would volunteer to put the shades on, and then while my crewmates were zipping into their sleep restraints or getting into on the International Space Station, they have kind of it's almost like a locker, their own little sleep compartment. While they were all doing that, I'd be floating over to the window and putting the shades, and then I could take just a little bit extra time and look out before I actually closed up the shade. And one of those times when I was putting on the mid-deck window shade of the space shuttle, I was hanging out, and the view just really caught me. From that perspective, you're looking down the length of the truss that goes, the length of the truss that goes along the International Space Station. So you're looking like in this direction, and you see those solar arrays. Well, that was the view I had. We were on the nighttime side, so I couldn't see the truss and the solar arrays but I could see it because it was blocking the stars. Everything around it was all zillions of stars. So you could actually see the shape, right, of the solar rays and the truss. And then all these zillions of stars surrounding it. And I was just watching that for a minute. And all of a sudden, the solar rays, as you can see this picture, are kind of a gold. They're gold colored, but they're kind of a dull gold. Well, all of a sudden, I saw a thin blue line appear, a really thin blue curved line. Right. So I realized, okay, I'm looking at the horizon, right? And we're coming up, we've got to be coming up to the daytime side. And that line raised up, and another blue line came up underneath it, and then another, and another, and another, and another. They were all different shades of blue. Remember, I told you our photographs can't take good, our cameras can't take good photographs of it. I think there were probably 20 or 30 different layers of blue. But at that, so the solar arrays track the sun. That's how we provide power, electrical power to the International Space Station. And they rotate this way and they rotate this way. So they track the sun. When you're hitting that really low sun angle, because you're just coming up to the horizon, so really low sunlight angle, the sun hits those solar arrays and they start to glow brighter and brighter and brighter. It's like, you know, when you look in your toaster, it's really fun to turn on the toaster without the toast in it and look in there and watch the filaments get brighter and brighter and brighter till they're really bright. Well, that's what this was like, only instead of turning a bright red, they turned this brilliant Inca gold. I mean, they were gorgeous. And so they're just brilliant Inca gold out the window, and you realize, you know, they're golden sails. And I wasn't, at that point, I was just hanging there. I wasn't touching anything because I just wanted to get the experience of just free floating, right? So I wasn't holding on to anything. All my crewmates had already gone to bed, and Mission Control had turned off all their radios with us. So it was, you know, there was no talking or anything. Excuse me. And the only thing I could hear was the roaring of our motors and our fans and things like that, because it is a little bit noisy. And I realized, boy, this is like a golden sailing ship. Okay. And then by this time, the sun angle was really high. Excuse me, I need a sip of water, sorry. So the sun angle was much higher. By then, when it gets that really bright white, the whole station is brilliant white light, like you see here, and those golden solar rays kind of fade out a little bit, but they're still gold. But so we were on the daytime side of the planet by then, right? And I looked down, and we're over the ocean, just like in this picture. Which, if you think about, you're usually over the ocean when you're looking at the planet from 250 miles up. So, and I was looking down at the ocean, and it looked really rough. And I was thinking how smooth. I mean, you know, just hanging there, you knew you were in a human-made machine, right? Because you could hear the whirring of the fans and motors. And we were. It was like, I felt like we were in this sailing ship, really, really smooth sailing ship, sailing over the top of the ocean. And I'm looking down at the really tough ocean, thinking about the early days of exploration and how hard and challenging it was for those early explorers. You know, the reason most all of us are here now in this country was all from those early days of exploration, and how challenging it was for them to cross those ocean waters and everything. And that was so hard. And yet what we were doing seemed really easy, even though it's really challenging. It just seemed really easy because the sailing was so smooth. And then it was just one of those serendipitous moments. I looked back up at the horizon, and right above the horizon, there was a crescent moon hanging there off to the right. And it was just this magical, magical moment. And I thought, wow, this is so, we're sailing so smoothly. It seems like all we have to do is take a hard yank on the tiller, take a sharp right turn, and sail straight to the moon. Now, any of you who know physics know that's impossible to do, but it didn't seem impossible. And that's when it really hit me. And I didn't know how I would feel or think about any of this stuff before I flew, of that in particular. But that's when it really hit me that space exploration is a very, very natural thing for human beings to do. And so I guess between the environmentalism and the we're all in this together and the internationalism and that space exploration, it's human. It's a human thing to do.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. I know we're like I said, I think we could talk forever, but I think we've reached the time that we probably should send everybody off. But we just really want to thank you for your time and your insight, for your service to the country, for joining us here, and for bringing good back here to Earth and to Idaho. I'm going to propose now, as we like to do around here, if everybody on the call would care to unmute yourselves real briefly, and we will offer Barbara Morgan a round of applause.
No, thank you.
Read it again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. First of all, thank you. I apologize for my long answers. You can tell I get really excited about this stuff, and I'm sorry about all the details. I drive my husband crazy. So I apologize for that. Thanks for obliging me.
Not at all.
Thank
And
you very, very much.
And again, thank you all, fellow Idahoans, fellow Earthlings. And I hope someday we'll actually all get to meet you in person and get back over to Idaho Falls. Meanwhile, please, all of you stay very safe and very healthy. And hopefully we'll all get vaccinated and be able to get together soon. Thanks. And Jeff, thank you so much, and lots of love to you and your family.
Thanks. Likewise. Take care. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.